This isn't a bus ticket, kid. First class is for people who actually matter." Those were the last words Beatrice said before she made the biggest mistake of her career. She thought she was just putting a thug in his place. She didn't know that the boy in the hoodie held the power to ground the entire fleet with a single text message. When the captain slammed the brakes mid-runway and turned the plane around. The passengers gasped, but Beatrice went pale. The pilot wasn't turning back for a mechanical failure. He was turning back to fire her. Watch until the end to see the most brutal instant karma in aviation history. The air inside JFK's Terminal 4 was thick with the scent of expensive coffee and the quiet rustle of high-stakes business. This was the dedicated lounge for Royal Horizon Airlines, the carrier that prided itself on catering exclusively to the top 1%. To work for Royal Horizon wasn't just a job. It was a status symbol, and no one wore that status more aggressively than Beatrice. Beatrice adjusted her silk scarf, her eyes scanning the line of passengers with the precision of a predator looking for weak prey. She was the senior purser for flight RH88 to London Heathrow, and she considered the first-class cabin her personal kingdom. She had a mental checklist for who belonged there. Bespoke suits, Patek Philippe watches, and the distinct bored expression of old money. If you didn't fit the list, Beatrice made sure you knew it. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," she purred, flashing a practiced porcelain smile at a silver-haired man holding a platinum card. "Seat 2A is ready for you. Champagne is already on ice." "Charming as always, Beatrice." Mr. Sterling nodded, breezing past. Her smile instantly vanished as the next passenger stepped up. The atmosphere at the podium shifted from welcoming to icy hostility in a nanosecond. Standing before her was a boy who looked no older than 19. He was black, tall, and dressed in an oversized grey hoodie, loose basketball shorts, and scuffed retro Jordans. He had a pair of large headphones around his neck and a beat-up duffel bag slung over one shoulder. To Beatrice, he looked like he had taken a wrong turn on his way to a Greyhound bus station. He didn't say a word, just quietly placed his boarding pass on the marble counter. Beatrice didn't even look at the pass. She looked at his shoes, then his hoodie, and finally his face. She let out a short, incredulous huff of air, a laugh disguised as a sigh. "Sweetie," she said, her voice dripping with condescending syrup. "You're lost. Economy boarding is at gate 45. This is the priority lane. It's for first-class passengers only." The boy, whose name was Jaden, didn't flinch. He had soft, intelligent eyes that seemed tired. "I know," he said, his voice deep and calm. "I'm on this flight." Beatrice rolled her eyes, making sure the passengers behind him saw her annoyance. She picked up the boarding pass between two fingers as if it were a soiled tissue. She glanced at it, expecting to see a seat number like 42F or 55C. Her eyes narrowed. Passenger, Jaden Cole. Seat 1A. Status VIP. The bold letters seemed to mock her. Seat 1A was the owner's suite, the most expensive secluded spot on the plane, usually reserved for A-list celebrities or diplomats. Beatrice laughed. It was a loud, sharp sound that made people turn their heads. "Okay, this is actually funny," she said, tossing the pass back at him. It fluttered off the counter and landed on the floor. "Where did you get this? Did you print it off the internet, or did you steal it from a daddy's wallet?" Jaden bent down slowly to pick up the pass. He wasn't angry. He just looked disappointed. "I bought the ticket. It's real. You can scan it." I'm not scanning a fake ticket, and I'm not holding up my line for a prank." Beatrice snapped, her face hardening. She signaled to the security officer standing a few yards away. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for fraud. If you don't walk away right now, I'll have you banned from the airline." "Check the system," Jaden said, his voice firming up. "Just type in the name. Cole. I don't need to check the system to know that you don't belong in seat 1A. Beatrice hissed, leaning over the counter so only he could hear. "Seat 1A costs $20,000. You look like you couldn't afford the tax on a bag of peanuts. Now move, or you're going to jail." Behind Jaden, a line of impatient passengers began to murmur. Beatrice felt validated. She was protecting the sanctity of the first-class experience. She was the gatekeeper. "Is there a problem here?" asked a deep voice. It was Mr. Sterling, who had paused near the jet bridge entrance. He was looking at Jaden with curiosity, not malice. "Just a confusion, Mr. Sterling." Beatrice beamed, switching back to her customer service mask. "This young man seems to think a hoodie is appropriate attire for the royal suite. We're handling it." Jaden looked at Beatrice, a strange glint appearing in his eye. It wasn't fear. It was the look of a chess player who just watched his opponent make a fatal blunder. "Fine," Jaden said. "I'll wait." "You won't wait here." Beatrice pointed a manicured finger toward the general seating area. "Sit over there. When I'm done boarding the actual human beings, I'll deal with you." Jaden didn't argue. He walked over to the plastic chairs and sat down, pulling out his phone. He didn't look like a kid who was worried about the police. He looked like someone counting down the seconds to an explosion. 20 minutes passed. The entire first class and business class roster had boarded. Beatrice had greeted every single one of them with warmth and deference, offering compliments on their luggage and jewelry. She felt powerful. She had successfully filtered out the riff-raff. The gate area was now empty save for Jaden and 2 gate agents who looked nervous. One of them a younger woman named Sarah. "No, let's call her Chloe," whispered to Beatrice. "B, maybe we should just scan it. If it beeps, it beeps. If it doesn't, we call the cops. The flight closes in 5 minutes." Beatrice scoffed. "It's about the principle, Chloe. If we let people like him even think they can try this, the next thing you know, the cabin will look like a subway station. But fine, let's humiliate him properly." Beatrice walked over to Jaden, her heels clicking loudly on the terrazzo floor. "Last chance," she said, looming over him. "Admit it's fake, and I let you walk away. Try to board, and I call the airport police." Jaden stood up. He towered over her. "Scan it." Beatrice snatched the pass from his hand and marched back to the podium. She held it under the scanner, a smug grin plastered on her face, waiting for the angry red light and the error buzz. Beep! A crisp green light flashed on the screen. "Welcome on board, Mr. Cole." Beatrice froze. She stared at the screen, blinking. The system had accepted it. It wasn't just a valid ticket. It was a priority override ticket, a classification she had never seen before. Chloe gasped. It worked. B let him on. We have to close the doors. Beatrice felt a hot flush of embarrassment crawl up her neck. Her narrative was crumbling, but her ego wouldn't let her back down. There had to be a mistake, a system glitch, a hacker. "Fine," Beatrice spat, shoving the pass into Jaden's chest. "The machine might be broken, but don't think for a second you're getting the royal treatment. I'm watching you." Jaden took the pass and walked onto the jet bridge. When he entered the aircraft, the atmosphere was serene. Soft jazz was playing. The lighting was a calming amber. He turned left toward the first-class cabin. Beatrice was right behind him. She rushed past him, blocking the aisle to the exclusive 1A suite. "No," she said, her voice hushed but venomous. "You are not sitting there." "My ticket says 1A, Jaden said calmly. "I don't care what the ticket says. That seat is reserved for a diplomat who is arriving late." Beatrice lied, her heart racing. She couldn't bear the thought of serving caviar and Dom Perignon to a kid in a hoodie. It offended her sense of order. "You're going to sit in the jump seat in the galley, or you can get off. Those are your options." "The jump seat." Jaden raised an eyebrow. "You want a paying passenger to sit on a crew bench. Take it or leave it. I am the senior purser. On this plane, I am the law." Jaden looked at the plush leather 1A seat, empty and inviting. Then he looked at the uncomfortable fold-down crew seat near the lavatory. He pulled out his phone again. "Okay, I'll take the jump seat. But I need your name." "It's Beatrice," she sneered, tapping her golden name tag. "Beatrice. Make sure you spell it right in your little complaint email. Nobody reads them anyway." Jaden sat on the hard, narrow jump seat. He buckled the complex harness. He looked ridiculous, a tall boy squeezed into a tiny crew seat, while the luxury cabin lay empty just 10 feet away. Passengers were starting to notice. Mr. Sterling, from seat 2A, lowered his newspaper. "Excuse me, miss. Is there a reason that your young man isn't in his seat 1A, is empty?" Beatrice smiled, leaning in to whisper confidentially to Mr. Sterling. "Security concerns, sir. We believe the ticket might be fraudulent, but we didn't want to delay your departure. We're keeping him contained until we land in London, where the authorities will handle it. I'm doing this for your safety." Mr. Sterling looked doubtful, but stayed silent. The plane pushed back. The safety demonstration began. Beatrice made a point of standing directly in front of Jaden during the demo, glaring at him. When she did the final cabin check, she kicked his duffel bag further under the seat with her foot. "Comfortable," she mocked. Jaden didn't look up. He was typing a message on his phone. The screen was dimmed, but the recipient's name at the top was listed simply as Dad, CEO. The message read, "Gate agent laughed at the pass. Denied seat 1A. Forced me into the galley jump seat. Accused me of theft. Her name is Beatrice. Plane is taxiing. Handle it." He hit send just as the plane turned onto the active runway. The engines roared to life, pressing everyone into their seats. Beatrice buckled herself in, satisfied. She had won. She had kept the sanctuary pure. But as the plane accelerated, picking up speed for takeoff, 100 knots, 120 knots, something happened that Beatrice had never experienced in her 20 years of flying. The engines suddenly cut power. The roar died down to a whine. The brakes engaged aggressively, throwing Beatrice forward against her harness. The plane shuddered and slowed, aborting the takeoff mid-runway. The cabin went silent. A collective gasp rippled through the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. It sounded tense, angry. "This is Captain Harrison. We are aborting takeoff. We have been ordered by corporate HQ to return to the gate immediately." Beatrice frowned, confused. "Corporate HQ? Why?" Then the captain spoke again, and this time his voice was trembling. "We have a security breach involving a member of the crew. Everyone remain seated." Beatrice looked at Jaden. He was finally looking up at her, and for the first time, he smiled. The silence in the cabin was heavier than the gravity of the takeoff. The massive Boeing 777, a machine built to conquer continents, felt clumsy and awkward as it lumbered off the active runway and onto the taxiway. The engines, usually a roar of promise, now whined with a low mechanical moan, as if the plane itself was disappointed. Beatrice unbuckled her harness the moment the fasten seatbelt sign chimed off, though the plane was still moving. She stood up, smoothing her skirt with aggressive, jerky motions. Her face was a mask of righteous indignation. In her mind, the narrative was clear. The captain had realized that a security risk, the boy in the hoodie, was sitting in the galley, unvetted and dangerous. The captain was turning around to have him arrested. She was the hero who had flagged it. She looked down at Jaden, who was still strapped into the uncomfortable rear-facing jump seat. He looked calm, too calm. He was scrolling through a music playlist on his phone, seemingly oblivious to the fact that he was the reason 300 people were returning to New York. "I hope you have a good lawyer," Beatrice hissed, leaning down so her face was inches from his. Her perfume, usually pleasant, felt suffocating in the tight space. "Disrupting a flight crew. That's a federal offense. You're looking at 10 years easy. And for what? A prank, a TikTok video." Jaden paused his music. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I didn't disrupt the crew, Beatrice. I sat where you told me to sit. I haven't said a word." "Your presence is the disruption," she spat. "Do you know who is in the cabin? Mr. Sterling runs a hedge fund. Mrs. Galloway in 3F owns half of Manhattan real estate. Their time is worth more than your entire life, and you just wasted an hour of it." She spun around and marched into the first-class cabin to do damage control. The atmosphere there was close to mutiny. "This is unacceptable." Mrs. Galloway, a woman draped in diamonds and cashmere, slammed her champagne flute down on the tray table. "I have a dinner in London at 8. Why are we turning around?" Beatrice put on her most sympathetic, tragic face. She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, making sure the surrounding passengers could hear. "I'm so terribly sorry, Mrs. Galloway. It's the situation in the galley." Beatrice gestured vaguely toward the front, where Jaden was sitting. "The young man I tried to stop at the gate, he managed to slip through with a counterfeit ticket. The captain feels it's unsafe to cross the Atlantic with him on board. We have to go back to let the marshals take him off." A ripple of outrage went through the cabin. "The thug in the hoodie?" Mr. Sterling asked, his face reddening. "I knew it. I saw him arguing with you. You should have dragged him off by his ear." "I tried, Mrs. Sterling." Beatrice sighed, playing the martyr. "But regulations are so soft these days. We aren't allowed to touch passengers. But don't worry. The police will be waiting at the jet bridge. Once they handcuff him and drag him off, we'll be back in the air. Consider this a brief intermission." She walked down the aisle, collecting empty glasses, feeding the fire of their anger. She wanted an audience for Jaden's arrest. She wanted him to feel the shame of 100 wealthy eyes judging him as he was led away in irons. Back in the galley, Chloe, the junior flight attendant, looked pale. She was standing near the cockpit door, holding the interphone handset. She had just spoken to the flight deck. "B," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. "I just talked to Captain Harrison." "Is he furious?" Beatrice asked, grabbing a bottle of water. "I bet he is. Did he say how many cops are meeting us?" "He didn't mention cops," Chloe said, biting her lip. "He asked if the passenger in seat 1A was comfortable." Beatrice froze. "What?" "He asked if Mr. Cole was comfortable," Chloe repeated. I told him Mr. Cole wasn't in 1A, that he was in the jump seat." "And?" Beatrice demanded, her stomach giving a slight lurch. There was a silence, a long silence, and then he just hung up. He slammed the phone down so hard it hurt my ear. Beatrice waved her hand dismissively, though her hand was shaking slightly. He's stressed. He probably thinks we put him in the jump seat for safety to keep an eye on him. It's fine. When we get to the gate, the authorities will sort it out, and I'll get a commendation for spotting a fraud. The plane finally lurched to a halt. They weren't just at any gate. They were back at Gate 42, the primary heavy-lift gate for the airline. Through the porthole window, Beatrice saw the jet bridge extending toward the aircraft door. But beyond that, on the tarmac, she saw something odd. Usually for a security breach, there would be police cruisers with flashing lights. But there were no police cars. Instead, there were 3 black SUVs parked right next to the stairs. They looked like government vehicles, or perhaps high-end private security. "See," Beatrice gloated, turning to Jaden. "They brought the feds. You really messed up, kid." Jaden unbuckled his harness. He stood up and stretched his tall frame, filling the small galley. He picked up his duffel bag. "Beatrice," Jaden said, his voice dropping an octave, sounding suddenly much older than 19. "You have a really bad habit of judging books by their covers. It's going to be a hard habit to break when you're unemployed." "Sit down," Beatrice shrieked. "You do not stand until the police tell you to stand." The fasten seatbelt sign turned off. The sound of the aircraft door disarming was loud in the silent cabin. Beatrice composed herself, smoothing her hair. She stood directly in front of the door, ready to brief the officers the moment they stepped aboard. She practiced her opening line. "Officer, the suspect is aggressive and refused to follow crew instructions." The heavy door swung open. Beatrice opened her mouth to speak, but the words died in her throat. Standing in the jet bridge wasn't a police officer. It was a man in a charcoal 3-piece Italian suit. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, with steel-grey hair and a face carved from granite. He radiated an aura of terrifying authority. It was Arthur Pendergast. Beatrice gasped. She knew who he was. Everyone at Royal Horizon Airlines knew who Arthur Pendergast was. He was the regional director of operations for the entire North American continent. He answered only to the global board. He was a man who fired station managers for having dust on their podiums. Behind him stood 2 other men, one holding a tablet, the other holding a briefcase. And behind them, looking furious, was the station manager, Mr. Henderson, who looked like he was about to vomit. Beatrice's mind raced. They sent the director for a ticket fraud. This kid must be a master criminal, maybe a hacker who stole millions. "Mr. Pendergast," Beatrice said, stepping forward and extending her hand, trying to recover her composure. "I am so relieved you're here. The situation has been contained. The suspect is right here in the galley I kept him." Mr. Pendergast didn't shake her hand. He didn't even look at her. He looked through her as if she were made of glass. He stepped around her, entering the galley with the focus of a heat-seeking missile. He stopped in front of Jaden. The cabin was silent. Mr. Sterling and the other first-class passengers were craning their necks to see the arrest. Mr. Pendergast bowed. It wasn't a nod. It was a formal, deferential bow of the head. "Mr. Cole," Pendergast said, his voice filled with genuine mortification. "On behalf of the entire Royal Horizon executive team, I offer my deepest, most sincere apologies. This is a catastrophic failure of our standards." Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. Her knees went weak. She grabbed the edge of the galley counter to steady herself. Jaden didn't bow back. He just looked at Pendergast, his face stern. "Arthur," Jaden said. "Jaden." He knew his name. "My father tells me you run a tight ship. Today your ship felt more like a leaky canoe." "We are investigating the chain of failure immediately, sir," Pendergast said, beads of sweat appearing on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Your father is on the secure line in the cockpit. Captain Harrison is waiting for you." "My father," Beatrice squeaked. The sound escaped her involuntarily. Pendergast finally turned to look at Beatrice. His eyes were cold, dead sharks. "Senior Purser, Beatrice Miller," he said. He didn't need to look at a name tag. "Do you know who this is?" Beatrice shook her head, unable to speak. "This is Jaden Cole," Pendergast announced, his voice projecting into the first-class cabin so the wealthy passengers could hear. "He is the only son of Reginald Cole, the founder and majority shareholder of Royal Horizon Airlines. This young man owns the plane you are standing on. He owns the uniform you are wearing. Technically, Miss Miller, he owns the very air you are breathing right now." The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Sterling in seat 2A dropped his newspaper. Mrs. Galloway's mouth hung open. Jaden looked at Beatrice. The thug facade was gone. In its place was the heir to a multi-billion-dollar aviation empire. "I tried to tell her," Jaden said calmly to Pendergast. "I told her my name. I told her to scan the ticket. She laughed at me because I was wearing a hoodie. She told me I belonged in economy. Then when the system cleared me, she denied me my seat 1A, which I paid for, and forced me to sit in the crew jump seat." Pendergast's face turned a shade of purple that looked dangerous. He turned to Mr. Henderson, the station manager. "Is this true?" Pendergast barked. We saw the security footage, sir," Henderson stammered, looking at the floor. "Miss Miller threw the boarding pass at him. She publicly humiliated him at the gate. And then," Jaden added, crossing his arms, "she told the other passengers I was a criminal. She incited them against me." At that moment, the cockpit door opened. Captain Harrison stepped out. He had 4 stripes on his shoulder and 20 years of experience, but he looked terrified. He walked straight to Jaden. "Mr. Cole," the captain said, his voice thick with emotion. "I had no idea. When I saw the manifest update with your VIP status, I assumed you were comfortable in 1A. When I received the text from your father, asking why his son was sitting on a jump seat," the captain glared at Beatrice with pure hatred. "I turned the plane around immediately. I will not fly the owner's son like cargo." Beatrice found her voice. It was small and broken. I didn't know. He was dressed like... He looked like... Like what?" Jaden stepped closer to her. "Say it, Beatrice. What did I look like?" Beatrice couldn't say it. The racism, the classism, the bias. It was all hanging in the air, ugly and undeniable. "You judged me," Jaden said softly. "You decided my worth based on my sneakers and my skin color. You didn't check the manifest. You didn't do your job. You just wanted to feel powerful." Jaden turned to Pendergast. "I want my seat now. Seat 1A. I have a meeting in London." "Of course, sir," Pendergast said. "Immediately." "But," Jaden raised a finger, "I don't want to fly with this crew. Specifically, her." He pointed at Beatrice. "And I don't think she should be wearing that uniform anymore. It represents excellence. She represents ignorance." Pendergast nodded. He turned to Beatrice. "Miss Miller, hand over your badge and your ID. You are relieved of duty effectively immediately. You will be escorted off the aircraft." "But how will you get to London?" Beatrice stammered, tears streaming down her face, her mascara running. "You're short a purser. You can't fly with a minimum crew." Jaden smiled. It was a cold smile. "Oh, don't worry about that. My father anticipated this. Look out the window." Beatrice looked. Another set of stairs was rolling up to the rear of the plane. A fresh flight crew, a completely new team of 10 flight attendants, all in pristine uniforms looking sharp and ready, was marching across the tarmac. They had been pulled from reserve and rushed here in the SUVs. "You're not just fired, Beatrice," Jaden said. "You're being replaced, wholesale, right now, in front of everyone." Pendergast gestured to the door. "Get off the plane, Miss Miller." Beatrice looked at the first-class cabin. The passengers she had sucked up to the people she thought were her peers were all looking at her. They weren't looking at her with sympathy. They were looking at her with disgust. She had inconvenienced them. She had insulted the owner. She was now the riffraff. "Walk of shame," Jaden whispered, echoing her earlier sentiment. "Enjoy it." Beatrice unpinned her wings, the gold wings she had worked 10 years to earn. Her hands shook so badly, she pricked her finger, a drop of blood staining her white blouse. She handed them to Pendergast. She grabbed her purse and walked toward the door. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, she heard the sound of applause. It started with Jaden, but then Mr. Sterling joined in. Then Mrs. Galloway. Soon the entire first-class cabin was clapping as she left. But the nightmare wasn't over. As Beatrice stumbled up the jet bridge, blinded by tears, she realized she wasn't just walking into the terminal. She was walking into a media storm. The walk from Gate 42 to the exit of Terminal 4 is approximately a half-mile. For Beatrice, it felt like a death march through a canyon of glass and steel. She had expected to slip away quietly. She assumed that once she was off the plane, the event was over. But she had forgotten the one variable that dictates modern life, the smartphone. As she emerged from the jet bridge door, clutching her purse and her torn pride, she noticed the atmosphere in the waiting area for the next flight was strange. People weren't looking at their luggage or reading books. They were huddled over their screens, whispering. A teenager sitting near the podium looked up, saw Beatrice and nudged his friend. "That's her. That's the Karen from the video." Beatrice kept her head down, walking fast. Her heels, usually a rhythm of authority, now sounded like the frantic ticking of a bomb. She reached into her bag to grab her phone, intending to call an Uber. When she unlocked her screen, she nearly dropped the device. Her notifications weren't just a list. They were a blur of scrolling text moving so fast she couldn't read individual messages. Missed calls from numbers she didn't know, texts from friends, and a barrage of alerts from Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. She opened the first link sent to her by a horrified colleague. It was a TikTok video. The caption in bold red letters read, "Royal Horizon Purser humiliates owner's son, gets instant karma. Justice for Jaden, by Beatrice." Beatrice pressed play. Her stomach turned to ice. The video wasn't shaky or blurry. It was high definition, filmed from a perfect angle by someone standing in the priority line, likely the passenger who had been behind Jaden. The video showed everything. It showed Beatrice laughing. It captured the audio perfectly. "You look like you couldn't afford the tax on a bag of peanuts." It showed her tossing the boarding pass. It showed Jaden's calm, dignified response. But the video didn't stop there. The user had stitched it with a second clip footage from inside the plane. Mr. Sterling, the hedge fund manager, had apparently filmed the confrontation in the aisle where Beatrice forced Jaden into the jump seat. The video had been posted 20 minutes ago. It already had 4.5 million views. Beatrice felt a wave of nausea. She stumbled into the nearest ladies' restroom and locked herself in a stall. She sat on the toilet lid, her hands trembling uncontrollably. She checked the comments. User 8A2. I've flown with her. She was rude to my elderly mother last year. Glad she finally messed with the wrong one. Aviation geek. Turning a 777 around mid-runway that costs like $50K in fuel alone. She is done. Sarah Jenkins. Imagine being so racist you cost your airline a fortune and get fired by the owner's son. Beatrice's instinct was not remorse. It was survival. She was a fighter. She had climbed the ranks by being ruthless, and she wasn't going to let a misunderstanding ruin her life. They edited it, she whispered to herself. They took it out of context. She opened her own social media apps. Her plan was to control the narrative. She would post a tearful explanation. She would say she was following security protocols. She would say Jaden was acting suspicious. She would play the victim of a wealthy, entitled brat. She started typing a Facebook post. Today I was terminated for doing my job. I was protecting my passengers from a security threat. The individual refused to identify himself properly and... She hit post. Within seconds, the internet descended on her like a swarm of locusts. Comment 1. He refused to identify. The video shows him handing you his pass and you throwing it on the floor. Stop lying. Comment 2. We saw the video, Beatrice. You're done. Delete this. Comment 3. My cousin works at JFK Ops. He said the manifest was clear. You just didn't like his hoodie. Then came the doxing. Someone posted her LinkedIn profile. Someone else posted her salary band. The hashtag #boycottroyal. Horizon started trending with people demanding the airline issue a statement confirming she wouldn't receive a pension. Her phone rang again. It was a number she recognized. It was her union representative, a man named Carl. Carl, Beatrice answered, desperate. Thank God, you have to help me. They fired me without a hearing. That's a violation of Article 12. We need to file a grievance immediately. I want back pay, and I want to sue for defamation. There was a long silence on the other end. Beatrice. Carl said, his voice cold and distant. I've seen the video. It's edited. It's out of context. Stop, Carl snapped. I also spoke to Pendergast, and I spoke to the captain. Beatrice, you violated the Civil Rights Act, the Passenger Bill of Rights, and about 50 company policies. You profiled a passenger. You ignored a valid boarding pass. I am a dues-paying member, Beatrice screamed. You have to defend me. The union defends members against unjust termination, Carl said. This wasn't unjust. Also, Royal Horizon just released a press statement. They are distancing themselves from you completely to save their stock price. They've labeled your actions as rogue behavior. We can't touch this, B. You're on your own. Do not call this office again. The line went dead. Beatrice sat in the airport stall, the automatic flush whirring behind her. She was alone. But the true horror wasn't the silence. It was the noise from outside the bathroom door. She heard two cleaning ladies talking. Did you hear? One said. The son of Mr. Cole. He gave every passenger on that flight a $5,000 voucher for the delay, and he invited the whole crew, the new crew, to dinner in London. That boy has class, the other replied. Unlike that witch who used to work the gate. Beatrice realized she couldn't even leave the bathroom. Her face was now the most hated face in America. 3 weeks later. The apartment was dark. The curtains were drawn. Pizza boxes and unopened mail were piled on the coffee table. Beatrice hadn't left her house in 20 days. She had tried to wait out the storm, but the storm wasn't moving. It had settled over her life, drowning everything she had built. She had applied to Delta. Rejected. She had applied to American. Rejected. She had applied to Spirit Frontier and even a tiny charter cargo company in Alaska. Rejected. 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 Her name was flagged in the AIRS Aviation Industry Reference System database under Reason for Separation. It didn't just say fired, it said gross misconduct, security risk, high liability. She was unemployable in the sky. But Beatrice wasn't ready to give up. She was angry. She felt she was the victim of a corporate machine. She had found a lawyer, a strip mall attorney named Saul Goodman. Not the TV one, just a coincidence, a greasy man named Saul. Saul had promised her that he could get a settlement. Rich people hate bad press, Saul had told her. We sue for wrongful termination and emotional distress. We ask for $5 million. They'll settle for $1 million just to shut you up. Today was the day. She had a meeting at Saul's office. She put on her best suit, though it felt loose on her now. She had lost weight from the stress. She drove to the office wearing large sunglasses to avoid being recognized. When she walked into Saul's office, he wasn't smiling. He was sweating. He was sitting behind his desk, looking at a stack of documents that had just been couriered over. "We have a problem, Beatrice," Saul said, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "What problem? Did they offer a settlement?" Beatrice asked, sitting down. "Not exactly." Saul pushed a thick document toward her. It was bound in heavy legal paper, with the Royal Horizon letterhead embossed in gold. "This is a countersuit," Saul said. "They're suing me," Beatrice laughed nervously. "For what? Hurting their feelings?" "No," Saul said grimly. "For damages. Beatrice, do you know how much it costs to abort a takeoff for a Boeing 707-300ER? Beatrice blinked. I don't know. "A few thousand. Try again," Saul said, flipping to page 12 of the lawsuit. "Jet fuel dump to reach safe landing weight, $42,000. Runway slot fees and penalties from JFK Port Authority for blocking the active runway, $25,000. Passenger compensation vouchers issued by Mr. Cole, $1.5 million. Crew replacement logistics, $15,000. He pointed to the bottom line. Total damages sought, $1,682,000. "They are suing you for $1.6 million, Saul whispered. "And they are citing the malice and gross negligence clause in your contract. Usually employees are protected from these costs, but because you acted with proven discriminatory intent, which the video proves the corporate shield is gone, you are personally liable." Beatrice felt the room spin. "I don't have $1 million. I have 40,000 in my 401k. "There's more," Saul said. He looked terrified. "The Cole family legal team. They play hardball. They filed a motion this morning to freeze your assets pending the trial outcome. Your bank accounts are locked, Beatrice. Your credit cards are frozen." Beatrice stood up. "They can't do that." "They can, and they did. They are arguing that you are a flight risk. Ironic, I know." Saul closed the folder. "Beatrice, I can't represent you. I'm a slip-and-fall lawyer. These guys are sharks. They will eat me alive. You need a corporate defense team, which will cost you 50 grand just to start." "I can't pay you," Beatrice screamed. "My accounts are frozen." "Then I suggest you leave," Saul said, standing up. "And Beatrice, if I were you, I'd sell the car. You're going to need the cash for bus fare." Beatrice walked out of the law office into the blinding afternoon sun. She went to her car, her beloved Mercedes C-Class, the symbol of her status. She pressed the unlock button on her key fob. Nothing happened. She pressed it again. Nothing. A tow truck backed up in front of her car. A large man in a jumpsuit hopped out and began hooking chains to her bumper. "Hey!" Beatrice yelled, running over. "What are you doing? That's my car." The man checked his clipboard. "Beatrice Miller. Yes. Repo order," the man said, not even looking at her. Bank recalled the loan. Something about frozen assets and breach of credit terms. "Step back, lady." "You can't take it. I have to get home." "Not my problem," the man said. He hoisted the car up. As the Mercedes tilted, Beatrice's spare uniform, the one hanging in the back seat, swung back and forth, the gold wings catching the sunlight one last time. She watched her car disappear around the corner. She stood on the sidewalk, stranded. She reached into her purse to check her phone, to call someone, anyone. Her phone was dead. She had forgotten to charge it. Beatrice looked around. She was 10 miles from home. She had no car, no money she could access, no job, no reputation. She looked at her feet. She was wearing her expensive flight attendant heels, 3 inches of Italian leather, designed for the carpeted aisles of first class, not the cracked concrete of a city sidewalk. She took a step and stumbled. Across the street, a bus pulled up to the curb. It was a city bus, crowded, loud, and smelling of exhaust. The sign on the front said downtown. Beatrice remembered the words she had said to Jaden at the gate. "This isn't a bus ticket, kid." She dug into her pocket and found a crumbled $5 bill she had stuffed there days ago. Beatrice Miller, the Queen of Gate 42, the woman who had sneered at hoodies and headphones, walked slowly across the street. She climbed the steps of the city bus, her expensive heels clicking awkwardly on the metal. "Exact change only." The driver grunted, not looking at her. She fed the bill into the machine. She didn't get change. She walked down the aisle. There were no empty seats. She had to stand, grabbing a greasy handrail to steady herself as the bus lurched forward. She looked out the window as a plane soared overhead, a silver streak cutting through the clouds, heading somewhere expensive, somewhere beautiful. She wasn't on it, and she knew with a crushing certainty that she never would be again. 1 year later. The Greyhound bus terminal in Newark, New Jersey, smelled of diesel fumes, stale popcorn, and despair. It was a stark contrast to the lavender-scented marble-floored lounge of Terminal 4 at JFK, but this was Beatrice's new kingdom. She sat behind a scratched plexiglass window, wearing a polyester uniform that was 2 sizes too big. The name tag pinned to her chest didn't say Senior Purser. It just said B. "Next," she called out, her voice rasping. The months of stress had taken their toll. She looked 10 years older. Her hair, once immaculately styled in a French twist, was now pulled back in a messy, graying ponytail. A young woman stepped up to the window, popping gum loudly. She threw a crumpled wad of cash onto the counter. "1 ticket to Atlantic City. One way." "That's $28, Beatrice said, typing slowly on the ancient computer. "You're short $2. "Are you serious?" the girl snapped, rolling her eyes. "It's $2. Just print the ticket, lady. You look like you need to move the line faster." Beatrice felt a flash of her old fire. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell this girl that she used to serve champagne to diplomats. She used to manage a cabin of 300 people. She used to hold the power of the sky in her hands. But she didn't say anything. She couldn't. After the lawsuit, Beatrice had lost everything. The court had ruled in favor of Royal Horizon. She had been forced to liquidate her 401k, sell her condo, and declare bankruptcy to pay a fraction of the damages. The airline industry had blacklisted her so effectively that she couldn't even get a job at the airport gift shop. "I need the $2, ma'am," Beatrice whispered, looking down. "Store policy." The girl scoffed, dug around in her purse, and threw $2 at the glass. "Pathetic. Get a real job." Beatrice printed the ticket and slid it under the window. As the girl snatched it and walked away, Beatrice caught her own reflection in the glass. She saw a bitter, broken woman. She realized with a sinking heart that she had become the very thing she used to mock someone trapped in a life with no elevation. Her break time arrived. Beatrice grabbed her Tupperware container, leftover pasta, and walked to the cramped employee break room in the back. A small, dusty television was mounted in the corner, always tuned to the news. Beatrice sat down and began to eat mechanically. On the screen, the news anchor was speaking excitedly. And in business news, Royal Horizon Airlines is posting record profits, this quarter largely due to their rebranding as the Airline of Inclusivity. We go live now to the company headquarters for a special announcement from the youngest member of the board of directors. Beatrice stopped chewing. She looked up. There he was. Jaden Cole stood at a podium bathed in the flashing lights of camera strobes. He looked different than he had that day on the plane. He was wearing a tailored suit that fit his tall frame perfectly, but he still wore a pair of rare vintage Jordans, a signature style that had become part of the airline's new relaxed dress code. He looked powerful, confident, and kind. Next to him stood his father, Reginald Cole, and Arthur Pendergast, but Jaden was clearly the one in charge. "Thank you," Jaden said, his voice deep and resonant through the TV speakers. "A year ago, I walked onto a plane and was told I didn't belong. I was judged for how I looked, not for who I was. That moment was painful, but it was necessary. It revealed a culture that needed to change." Beatrice felt a lump form in her throat. He was talking about her. She was the villain in his success story. "Today," Jaden continued, "I am proud to announce the launch of the Open Sky Initiative. Royal Horizon is donating $50 million to fund flight school scholarships for underprivileged youth. We want to ensure that the pilot in the cockpit, the engineer in the hangar, and the executive in the boardroom look like the world we serve." The crowd on TV applauded wildly. "And," Jaden added, smiling, "we are retiring the old priority boarding system that separated people based on status. From now on, Royal Horizon boards by zone based on efficiency, not elitism, because at 30,000 feet, we are all just human beings trying to get home." The camera panned to the crowd. Beatrice saw faces she recognized. There was Chloe, the young flight attendant who had tried to warn her. Chloe was now wearing the gold wings of a senior purser. She looked happy. She was clapping the loudest. Beatrice stared at the screen, tears blurring her vision. Chloe had been promoted. The airline was thriving. Jaden was a hero. And Beatrice was sitting in a bus station break room, eating cold pasta. The door to the break room opened. Her manager, a gruff man named Rick, stuck his head in. "Hey B, break's over. You got a bus coming in from Philly. It's full. Get back to the window." I just need a minute," Beatrice stammered, wiping her eyes. "No minutes," Rick said. "You're on the clock. If you can't handle the rush, there's a stack of applications on my desk from people who can. You're replaceable, B." "You're replaceable." The words echoed the exact sentiment Jaden had used when he replaced the entire crew. It was the final twist of the knife. The karma wasn't just that she had lost her money. It was that she was now on the receiving end of the cold, unfeeling corporate machinery she had once wielded as a weapon. Beatrice stood up. She walked back to her booth. She sat down behind the glass. A line of tired, frustrated travelers was already forming. They wore hoodies. They wore headphones. They carried beat-up duffel bags. A year ago, Beatrice would have sneered at them. She would have judged them. Now she looked at the young man at the front of the line. He looked a lot like Jaden. "Ticket to DC," he said, looking at his phone. Beatrice took a deep breath. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't sigh. "Of course," she said softly, her voice trembling with a newfound humility. "Right away, sir. Have a safe trip." It was a small change. It was too late to save her career, too late to save her fortune, and too late to fix the past. But as she printed the ticket, a bus ticket for a person who mattered just as much as anyone else, Beatrice finally learned the lesson she should have known all along. The altitude doesn't make you superior. The uniform doesn't make you improved. How you treat people when you think no one is watching, that is the only status that matters. And somewhere above the grey clouds of Newark Flight RH-88 soared toward London, commanded by a diverse crew carrying passengers who were treated with dignity, leaving Beatrice far behind in the world she had created for herself. And that is the story of how one moment of arrogance grounded a career forever. Beatrice thought she was the gatekeeper of the elite. But she learned the hard way that true class isn't about the price of your ticket. It's about the content of your character. She ended up exactly where she told Jaden he belonged, while he soared to heights she could only dream of. It's a brutal reminder that when you try to humiliate others, you're often just writing the first chapter of your own downfall. I hope you enjoyed this story of justice served cold. If you believe that everyone deserves respect, regardless of what they wear or how they look, please hit that like button. Right now, it really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story about karma hitting back. Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder to be kind. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.